why are we doing Joule? And I think really it's about, we want to make the developer experience much better for our own teams within IntelliJ and Android Studio. And we think that like if they're more productive and happy and can build stuff faster, that will ultimately lead to better tools for all of you. And we think, you know, with Joule, it's because we have modern language and ecosystem that we can work with, which I think in reality is very important for one, hiring people, two, retaining people, and then
Although we can hire some people here.
We can hire some people here too, yeah. It's a little harder to hire Swing developers. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Cinco. I'm interaction designer on Android Studio.
I'm Sebastiano. I'm a UX engineer on Android Studio.
And we're here to talk to you about a thing we built called Joule, which helps people create IDE plugins in Jetpack Compose, or sorry, Compose. Have to make sure.
It had to happen.
Yeah. But like I said, we're both from the Android Studio team. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this interface. So Android Studio, as you know, it's built on the IntelliJ platform. And so under the hood, it's really a series of many plugins bundled under one giant plugin, which is the Android plugin. And so this is kind of why we're going to talk about it today. And so Studio and IntelliJ are really built on top of the IntelliJ platform. And really, like I said, it's all plugins. And they share like a common way to build all the functionality. This link, so you know, what does an actual plugin mean to build in IntelliJ? So there's a couple parts of it. The first part is there's a Gradle plugin, which I think is, yeah, makes sense. Plugin. But it's to package the plugin, but also there's specific things for IntelliJ that it needs. The other part, which I think is really the bulk of it, is the IntelliJ platform. So this is all the APIs you need to talk to the project, talk to different parts of the IDE, like the editor, the menu system, keyboard shortcuts. And then there's the front-end layer, written in Swing. Swing. How many people know Swing here? Oh, wow, that's more than I expected.
Way more than I expected.
Way more. Okay. Well, I'm sure you all love it. You've probably read this book or maybe profited off this book. You know, there's two strapping young lads that have also worked with us in the past that have written this book. And sure, you can use Swing, but it's not great. Why is it not great? Well, you know, it is an older technology. So at this point, I think when we're building modern UI, it's an obsolete model. There's not much documentation. I think it had its heyday maybe in the late 90s or mid 90s, you know, before everything like Stack Overflow and everything we have now. Because of that, you know, the community isn't as thriving as it used to be. So support or just trying to figure out anything is hard to do on the internet. The API didn't age well. So like I said, I think as complexity has increased and like more crazy UI designs have come up, it hasn't really scaled to meet that demand. And I think as part of that, it has kind of prevented best practices. So there's a very stateful model that Swing has, which makes it very hard to separate kind of the data layer from the UI layer. And so to really do any kind of really complex UI, it becomes somewhat of a nightmare full of bugs, which Seb is very familiar with. So what about using Compose? So how many people know about Compose Multiplatform? Okay, more than Swing, good.
That was easy.
Yeah. But you know, I think for everyone who does use it, you know that it does support desktop, so it can compile into a JVM app. It actually supports iOS now, which is cool, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. And you know, if you're daring, it does support web, so you can reuse the same code that you did for the desktop app to build web apps, although it is pretty experimental at this point. But you know, what's actually great is it already works in the IntelliJ platform. So I think when Compose Multiplatform first came out for desktop, they released a small sample in the repo that actually showed a plugin using Compose as an actual IntelliJ plugin. And you know, it's modern, easy to use, so it's based on Kotlin, and you know, it is being actively developed both by JetBrains and Google. but why isn't it being used as much in the IntelliJ platform? Well, one reason is there is material design for building UI, but it doesn't quite work. So this is a fun little demo that I had built a while ago. This is using Compose Multiplatform. So we have a nice material slider, some big buttons, and this rotating globe. But when you put it in the context of the IDE, it looks pretty awkward. Touch targets are pretty large. Zooming out, this is a fuller example. So now I actually have a tool window with Compose in it. It still looks a little weird. I mean, the fonts at least match, but the input field, it's this giant input field meant for touch. It's also purple themed, which is not a theme in IntelliJ, or at least this light theme. Checkboxes don't really match. So it's not really optimized for desktop. And when you actually do try to do the work to optimize it for desktop, these are a couple of other experiments we've done. Here we're trying to rebuild a color picker. You have to make smaller fields, or on the right, this is a plugin I actually built called a Modifiers Playground, but it's kind of in this weird in-between world of there's some material theming with that pink accent, but then I had to rebuild all the input controls to actually make sense for mouse, which wasn't great. And so really, material design doesn't quite work out of the box for Compose Multiplatform because it's not optimized for desktop, and at least for our purposes in IntelliJ and at Android Studio, it's not consistent with the IntelliJ platform. Which is why today we're going to talk about Joule. So what is Joule? So Joule is a Compose for Desktop implementation of the IntelliJ new UI design system. How many people have used the new UI in IntelliJ? All right, 50%, that's good. Maybe I'll sell it to you more today. Code name is actually called IntUI, but really it's built on Compose Foundation, but it is only limited to desktop for now. So don't use it in your iOS app or try to.
That would be weird anyway.
Yeah, that would be. And if you all are not familiar with what it means to say it's built on Compose Foundation, Seb actually did a great talk on this last year at Droidcon about kind of using Compose to build your own design system, which is what we've essentially done. So like I said, it's built on IntUI, which is the current new UI for IntelliJ. But if you do use Joule within the context of the IDE, it does accommodate the old UI, is what we call it now. But you don't expect to actually, at this point, use these components as is in a standalone desktop app. But just a small nod to JetBrains, though. So Joule was actually born out of a hackathon at JetBrains, spurred by the Toolbox team, actually. And so I think probably many of you know, but the Toolbox app actually is written in Compose Multiplatform. So they were one of the first pioneers of actually putting Compose Multiplatform in production for desktop. Joule is composed of 3 parts. The first one is the core. So this is really the foundational elements, so all the UI components and all the primitives that it takes to actually style these across the different themes. The second one is really the standalone UI theme. So this is the IntUI. This is the UI components styled exactly in this theme, so you can actually use this library standalone if you want to build your own desktop apps outside of IntelliJ. And then the third, which is more for the IDE, is the swing bridge. And so this is the layer that handles all the communication with the IntelliJ platform. So this pulls all the themes and styles and the font rendering to make sure that our UI components are consistent with the swing components that sit next to it. And to go into more technical detail, Seb is going to take over.
Okay, so as Chris has mentioned, we have a different implementation for running in the IDE. Why is that? That's because when you do run in the IDE, there's a lot more things that you need to take care of. You need some extra tricks, so we build the bridge. Now, the bridge is essentially a theme that is hooked onto the swing look and feel, so that whenever you have a theme in your IDE, then the bridge is able to pick up the colors, the fonts, the sizes, all those things, and make sure that the implementation in Compose knows about those and responds to changes in those. which is not something that happens automatically. So how does it work? Well, it's not trivial. There's a lot of work involved. It's mostly reverse engineering, and yes, I am aware that the code for the Swing implementation is available. It's still reverse engineering. We need to do a lot of magic because IntelliJ has a number of functionalities that are not very obvious but are very important. For example, did you know that icons in the IDE get patched at runtime to adapt to the colors of the theme? Well, now you know, and that's something that we need to do as well, and we need to replicate it. Obviously, that's insane to redo it all from scratch, so what we're going for is to try and reuse what's already there instead of re-implementing it, because otherwise the next release of IntelliJ changes anything, it doesn't work anymore. Our ultimate goal is to be consistent with the Swing implementation so that when you create a plugin, you get something that, like the goal is, if people don't notice it's Compose, then we have achieved our goal. And that's made a bit more difficult by the fact that the specs for IntUI that Chris has shown the screenshot from earlier, they don't exactly match the implementation. There are some areas where they are wildly different, and areas in which they're mildly different, and areas in which they kind of look the same, at least if you don't look too hard. For addressing this, because we still wanted to have a more complete implementation for standalone apps, we have created the Swing compat mode, which is essentially disabling a bunch of stuff that Swing doesn't do, but we can do. So when you run Joule in the IDE, the Swing compat is disabled automatically, is turned on automatically for you, so a number of things don't show up that would be weird. Obviously, this is the point where I say it's not production level yet. There are still things that need to be done. We have explorations using it actually in production-focused features that will eventually come out. But if you decide to go ahead, obviously expect some breaking changes, especially in the early days that we're in. There is right now no API stability guarantee. I'm going to tell you already, the API is going to change. The tooling for Compose Multiplatform is it's quite immature compared to the Jetpack Compose tooling you're used to in Studio. We're working on that. And there are some missing features, both in the tooling and in Joule compared to what you would get with Swing. We're also working on that. Don't run away yet, it's not time, because now the famous demo. We're going to do small offering to the gods. Hoping it works. Will it? Okay, so what we have here is a simple...
Can you make the font bigger?
No. That's not the point. Thank you, Ivan. So what we have here is a Swing panel. It doesn't matter what it shows, but it's just a list of all the Android Studio releases since, wow, a long time ago. And you can select them. You see some details over here, the splash screen. You can type something. You want to see iguana. That's what we're going to do now. Just a couple of things I want to point out. The tags you see over here, they're supposed to have a different text color, but Swing doesn't agree with my decision, and it's overriding it, and I didn't have time to fix it. Well, to work around it. The other thing is that the images, they're supposed to scale. Yeah, they do sometimes. This took 2 days to implement, and I know Swing. Okay, so let's go ahead and, check boxes. So the first thing we need to do is to uncomment this so that we get our additional tool window, and then we go here. So here I will increment the font a bit. There you go. So here you can see it looks like a normal Jetpack Compose application. We have our bridge theme, as we mentioned. The SVG loader is an implementation detail. The API is still very much in flux, so don't look too hard at it. It's going to run away at some point. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is looking at there's the top level component is this splitter here. So that's what we're gonna implement first. I'm gonna cheat, because otherwise I would stay here for too long, because I'm terrible at typing. So what we have here is a dual component, which is called horizontal split layout, and it takes a first and a second component. And if I run this, it runs. So yeah, we have an amazing plugin. Well, at least this is Compose, so there's that. But we can do better than that, obviously. So let's go ahead and create the components. We want a left column and a right column. So I'm going to create the definitions for them, and I am going to add the call to it there, and then I can start implementing it. So, not the right one. Okay. So first of all, we need to get the data into the UI in some way. In IntelliJ, we don't have, and in desktop in general, there are no view models, but you can think of services as the equivalent to view models. They can be scoped to the entire application or to the open window. In this case, we have a service that is scoped to the project, so the open application, and that's where the data is going to come from. I've created that. Think of a very basic view model. That's all there is to it. Okay, so now in here we have a row that contains a filter, text field, and then it contains a list. So we're going to have a column. And because we are passed in a modifier and we are nice people, we're actually going to pass the modifier to the column. And in here, we're going to have to put let's start with the filter. So we have the filter implementation. It's a lot of stuff, but the basic idea, it's a row that contains the label, the search bar, which is implemented the similar way you would do it in Android. So it's a text field, an edit text, and then there's the menu. I'm not going to go too much into the menu, because that would be a separate talk by itself. Okay, and now we are in here, and I think we can start using the filter row. So we can pass the parameters. Let's see if it works. I know I'm testing the will of the gods every time I press run, but it does work. So we have the filter here. Obviously, that's the only thing we've implemented so far. We have the menu. We can choose whether we want to show Android releases or Android Studio releases. And we can type stuff, but it doesn't really do anything because there's no list. So let's build the list. I have my list implementation here. So selectable lazy column is a dual component that is just like a lazy column. It looks the same way, but it has the extra ability of allowing you to select the items, because that's something that the lazy column by itself doesn't do. So we built that. And then it looks the same as a normal lazy column. Right now, just to show that it works, we just have a text that displays something. And yeah, it works. I think I can even type things. Yeah, the filter works as well. Cool. Now, these don't look great. They look definitely different from the swing ones, so let's fix that. Let's create a component for the row. So, it's harder than it looks to remember all the shortcuts. Okay, so what we have here is a row. It takes in the content item to display and some state. And then it has the text to display, and we have the item tag. Because there's different types of content we can get in, there's a when, so it's either initializing one or the other. Could have been done differently, but it's fine. The one last thing that we can do, which is something that we cannot do in Swing very easily or easily at all, is to make the tags here clickable. so that when I click a tag, then that sets the filter. That's because in Swing, when you have a list or a table, these are actually bitmaps that are pre-rendered. You're kind of putting like interactive components in there. If you see something that looks like it, it's either a table or a hack or both. But we can do that in Compose. It's fairly easy. What we need to do is we take our painter modifier, we append an onClick, and we have on tag click, which is passed in. And here obviously is different data. So the first one is going to be item.api-level.toString, and the second one is going to be item.channel.name.lowercase. And we run it, and everything. I'm not going to say it works until it does. It doesn't. And you know why? Because I forgot one thing. I need to use that fancy new composable that I just created. I forgot the name of the composable, it seems. I'm very good at naming. I'm very bad at renaming the naming. Okay, and then we have the it is active is selected, I think was the order. Nope, of course it's wrong. Not too bad. And then we have the callback for when the tag is clicked. So then we do service.filter content, and we pass the value and give it a name. Ooh, typos. Okay, perfect, we're done. Let's run this, and let's see how it goes. Now we should see, yeah, and the text is the right color on the tag. Bonus. So now you can click things, they set the filter. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it does what you expect it to do, and we have a big blue box to fill. So let's do that. We need to look at the right column. So the right column is not used yet, so let's, so many imports. Let's add it here. And then we can go ahead and use it. So in the right column, we have the image at the top, and then we have a bunch of text at the bottom. Let's start with the image. Actually, I need to put it here, I think. Yes. So we have the release image that goes in here, and I need to put some extra content in there. Perfect. Okay. So the right column is fairly simply a scrollable container, which also has a scroll bar, and then there's a column with the image, and there's going to be text details later. Now I have a placeholder box. I'm just going to replace it with the release image and just pass in the image path, and I can run it again. And we got an image, and it's not stretched. There's another thing that I forgot to show you earlier, but if you go to the Android releases and click on some of them, you get very fuzzy images. That's an SVG. I think what's going on, but I'm not sure, is that Swing is rendering the SVG at its native size into a bitmap and then resizing the bitmap. We don't have that problem. Okay, last bit that is missing is the details. So let's do that. It's just boring text, reading, nothing particularly interesting. I will remember to use the composable this time though, maybe. And then selected item, and we can run it again. Hopefully, I'm not going to go through the details of that because it's boring, it's just text, and yeah. We're done. Perfect. Now, should we go overboard? Let's go overboard. So, there's one thing you'll never see in Swing, or almost never. That's animations, because they're very difficult to do in Swing. But as you know, not in Compose. So we can do that fairly easily, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that image nicer. So There we are. So what I want to do is I have a bunch of animation stuff. So I have an infinite repeatable transition, which is going to animate the image. And it's going to do the animation when we hover it. But that's not all. Because we can also do something else with Compose, which is we can use shaders. Overkill much. And now, when I run this, hopefully, because that would be worse if it didn't work now. When I over it, yeah, holo cards. So, yeah, I think that's enough over the top demos for today. Chris?
Cool. I'm looking forward to all the awesome designs I'm going to give you to implement now.
As long as they're shaders.
Yeah. So yeah, what is next for Joule then? So I think the first thing is, or what's happening right now, is we're actually piloting it with a couple of feature teams within JetBrains and in Android Studio. So one of the first features is package search, which is, yeah, we have the package search guy here. That's in IntelliJ. We're also going to use it in StudioBot, and Seb and I actually coincidentally work on StudioBot.
Very coincidentally.
Yeah. And then the other area, so for the profilers within Android Studio, there's some UI or UX work we're redoing. So a lot of the UI in that is custom, and so we're actually going to redo it in Compose. This is an old mock-up, but yeah, it hopefully will look better than this. So yeah, like I said, we're piloting it across different teams. That's happening now. But what we're also doing simultaneously is we're working with the IntelliJ platform to actually get Joule and Compose for Desktop within the platform so that any feature team can use either one of them. And part of the reason we're doing that is because when we're merging IntelliJ changes into Studio or IntelliJ is merging Studio changes into IntelliJ, it's a very big mess. And so if the platform can handle the actual core dependencies, that would be amazing, which is what we're working through now. But you know, what we're going to do later is really just focus on the core. So I think as Seb said, API is not stable, not production ready yet, so we definitely have to do that first. The other thing is, I think for the V1 catalog, we've done most of the UI components that were in the spec that we showed earlier, but there are still some components that we don't have that we think are important. I think one of the biggest ones is table. That would be really useful for package search and for profilers. But yeah, we still have to sort that out. And I think with that comes bug fixing and all the other fun stuff with stabilizing features. But yeah, if you'd like to actually start to use Joule today to build your own plugin for Android Studio or IntelliJ-based IDEs, you can get started. It's on GitHub. It's all there. Everything we talked about and demoed is on this repository. And then we actually have a dedicated channel within Kotlin Lang on Slack where you can ask many questions, and you know, Seb and I will be there, and then other engineers who've also been working on Joule as well. But yeah, ultimately, you know, why are we doing Joule? And I think really it's about, I think, two things. One is we think that, you know, we want to make the developer experience much better for our own teams within IntelliJ and Android Studio. And we think that like if they're more productive and happy and can build stuff faster, that will ultimately lead to better tools for all of you. And so really, one experience enhances the other experience. And we think, you know, with Joule, it's because we have a modern language and ecosystem that we can work with, which I think in reality is very important for one, hiring people, two, retaining people, and then
Although we can hire some people here.
We can hire some people here too,
but
yeah. It's a little harder to hire Swing developers, yeah. But then, you know, it's a modern framework, it's well supported, and so the hope is that we can iterate faster, hopefully less bugs, debugging is easier as well. And then, like we showed with our shader demo, the fidelity of the designs we can make are even higher, so we can have higher quality UI, we can have crazier animations, but ultimately, we think that that will actually lead to higher quality tools as well. And that's it. Thank you.